Welcome to this week's reflection. Today, I'd like to explore one of the most misunderstood aspects of Wu Wei. Go with the flow, let go, stop forcing. These are often the suggestions people give when we are under pressure, when we are overwhelmed, or when we are struggling with difficult situation, when Wu Wei will come in useful. And they are excellent suggestions, aren't they? In many ways, they are true. And yet, very often, they don't work. Have you ever noticed that the more you want yourself to let go, the harder it becomes? The more you try to relax, the more tense you feel. The more you try not to force things, the more frustrated you become. So, if the advice is not wrong, why doesn't it work? I believe the answer lies in one of the most misunderstood aspects of Wu Wei. Because before we can truly let go, there is often something that we must first learn. Before action becomes effortless, something must first be mastered. Wu Wei is often described as effortless. We move with ease, we remain calm under pressure, we don't seem to struggle as much as other people, everything appears natural, it's beautiful. Unfortunately, effortlessness is result, and you can't work on result to produce result. You don't become effortless simply by telling yourself to let go or to be effortless. In contrast to what many people think, effortlessness doesn't mean doing less. And by the same token, flow doesn't mean not working hard. And Wu Wei doesn't mean simply relaxing and waiting for life to take care of itself. At this point, you may be wondering, isn't that exactly what we have been told? After all, when people talk about Wu Wei, they often say, just let go, stop trying so hard, go with the flow. And while there is truth in these statements, there is also a danger. These descriptions focus on what Wu Wei looks like from the outside. They don't explain what makes it possible. So if you keep working on that, you will not be able to master Wu Wei. Now, it is a bit like watching a master pianist perform and saying, look how relaxed he is. Can you become a good pianist as well by being relaxed? Or watching an Olympic swimmer and say, look how effortless that looks. What we see is ease. What we don't see is the cultivation behind it. What we don't see are the years of practice, understanding, and refinement. The effortlessness is real, but it is not accidental. More often than not, it is earned. And that's what I'd like to dive in today together with you. This is one of the greatest paradoxes of life. The most effortless people are often the ones who have invested the most effort. In other words, effortlessness is not the absence of effort, and Wu Wei is not simply about letting go. Think about a master pianist again. When you watch them perform, everything appears natural. Their fingers move effortlessly across the keys. There seems to be no struggle, no hesitation, no conscious calculation, just music flowing through their fingers. And yet, we all know what lies beneath that performance. Thousands of hours of practice, years of refinement, countless mistakes, disciplined repetition. What we see is the performance. What we don't see is the cultivation. The effort has disappeared from sight, but it did not disappear from the journey. And the same is true in almost every field of life. the master chef, the experienced negotiator, the skilled athlete, the wise leader, they all share something in common. What appears effortless on the outside is often supported by years of invisible cultivation on the inside. And yet somehow, when people hear teachings about flow, they often imagine skipping this entire process. We want the ease without the preparation, the result without the cultivation, the harvest without planting the seed, the flow without first learning the water. And this reminds me of a beautiful story from the Chinese classics. A disciple of Confucius once met a boatman whose skill was extraordinary. He moved through the water with complete ease. There was no sign of tension, no sign of fear, no sign of struggle. Everything appeared effortless. Naturally, the disciple was curious. He asked the boatman for his secret. The boatman replied, "There's no secret." And then he said, "If you want to row a boat as skillfully as I do, first learn to swim." Rowing, swimming, how are they related? At first glance, that seems like a strange answer. After all, swimming and rowing are not the same thing. But the boatman was pointing to something much deeper. He explained, when a person knows how to swim, he rows a boat as though he were walking on dry land. What an extraordinary statement. Think about it for a moment. He wasn't talking about technique. He was talking about relationship. The boatman had become completely at home in the environment in which he operated. He understood the water, he trusted the waters, he no longer feared the water. And because the fear disappeared, the unnecessary effort also disappeared. This, I believe, is the real lesson. The boatman did not become effortless by trying to be effortless. He became effortless because he understood the water. He had learned how it moved, how it behaved, how to work with it rather than against it. And when understanding became deep enough, effort gradually gave way to ease. I think this raises an important question. If effortlessness comes from understanding, what exactly are we trying to understand? And how do we become more effortless in the things we do with the understanding? The simple answer is this. Put in the required effort, but eliminate the effort that is not necessary. In other words, cut down on wasted effort. Notice what I didn't say. I did not say put in less effort. Effortlessness is not about putting in less effort. It is about reducing wasted effort. And to do that, we must first understand where wasted effort comes from. Now, what do you think? What is the wasted effort in the things you do? This is something that I observe repeatedly in life. A large portion of what we call effort is actually friction. And friction can take many forms: resistance, fear, uncertainty, tension. Just imagine driving through an unfamiliar city. You are constantly alert, watching signs, checking direction, worrying about taking a wrong turn. Now, imagine driving through your own neighborhood. The distance may be exactly the same, the car is the same, the road is still there, yet the experience feels completely different. Why? Because you know the terrain. When you know the terrain, there is less friction along the journey, less uncertainty, less hesitation, less tension. The route did not change, you change. Your understanding change. And understanding reduces friction. That's exactly what happened to the boatman. The water was the same, the river was the same, but his relationship with the water was different. He understood it, he trusted it, he knew how it behaved, and because he understood the water, much of the friction disappeared. What remained was natural action. What remained was flow. And this idea of friction extends far beyond driving a car or rowing a boat. In fact, I believe it explains something that many people struggle with throughout their lives. Why do good people suffer? Many people suffer not because reality is painful, but because they want reality to be different. Life says one thing, the mind says another, and suffering emerges from the conflict. The tragedy is that this is an argument that we can never win. Reality always gets the final say. Yet many people continue fighting it. They become frustrated, they become disappointed, and they suffer. If you look closely, this is simply another form of friction. A tremendous amount of energy is spent resisting what already is. And that energy produces very little value. It is wasted effort. This does not mean that we should become passive. It doesn't mean that we should stop improving our circumstances. But before we can change reality, we must first see reality clearly. We must first work with what is. The boatman understands this. He did not argue with the water. He learned how water behaves. He learned how to work with it rather than against it. And when he stopped fighting the nature of the water, much of the friction disappeared. The same principle applies to us. The less we argue with reality, the less friction we create. And the less friction we create, the more effortless our actions become. Now, let's come back to the question, how can we be effortless in the things we do? We have learned that the first step is acceptance. Don't ever argue with reality, you will never win. But this is only the first steps. Even then, when we accept what is, you are already taking a huge step ahead. When we stop arguing with reality, when we stop wishing that things were different, when we stop wasting energy fighting what has already happened, we have already removed a great deal of friction. In a way, acceptance brings us back into contact with reality. So that was the first step. What is second? Having accepted reality, we must also learn how reality works. The boatman did not become skillful merely by accepting the existence of water. He studied it, he experienced it, he worked with it, he learned its nature. Only then could he move effortlessly within it. And this is where many people stop too soon. They accept reality, but they never take the next step of understanding it. Acceptance removes friction. Understanding creates capability. Acceptance allows us to see clearly. Understanding allows us to act effectively. Both are necessary. Without acceptance, we waste energy fighting reality. Without understanding, we lack the ability to work with reality. The boatman had both. He accepted the water and he understood the water. That is why rowing eventually becomes effortless. Of course, this principle doesn't apply only to rivers and boats. We see it everywhere. Let me use leadership as an example. Many leaders become frustrated because people don't behave the way they expect. They want everyone to think like them, work like them, communicate like them, respond like them. But reality refuses to cooperate. People are different. Personalities are different. Motivation are different. Experiences are different. Now imagine a leader who constantly fights this reality. Before long, he will be exhausted. As a leader, the first step is acceptance. You must accept that people are different. This is reality. But acceptance is only the beginning. The next step is understanding. You need to understand how different people think, what motivates them, what concerns them, how they communicate, how they respond under pressure. An effective leader does not necessarily work harder. He simply understands the human terrain better. And because he understands the terrain, he wastes less effort. This is very similar to what Sun Tzu teaches. A skilled strategist studies the battlefield. He studies conditions, he studies timing, he studies people. Only then can action become efficient. Without understanding, effort increases. With understanding, effort decreases. The battlefield does not become easier. The strategists simply learn how to move through it more effectively. I believe this is one of the most misunderstood aspects of Wu Wei. Wu Wei doesn't mean doing nothing, nor does it mean avoiding discipline, nor does it mean waiting passively for life to solve our problems. Wu Wei is what emerges when unnecessary action disappears. And when unnecessary effort disappears, understanding deepens. The boatman still rows, the pianist still plays, the leader still leads, the entrepreneur still works. Action remains, but struggle gradually falls away. This is why true effortlessness often appears only after long periods of cultivation. The beginner sees the ease, the master remembers the journey. So this is what I would like you to think about for this week. Perhaps there is an area of your life where things currently feel difficult, a relationship, a business challenge, a leadership responsibility, a health issue. Ask yourself, am I lacking effort or am I lacking understanding? Because sometimes the answer is not to push harder. Sometimes the answer is to understand more deeply, to study the water before rowing the boat, to learn the terrain before fighting the battle, to understand reality before trying to change it. The goal is not to avoid effort. The goal is to stop wasting effort. And when understanding deepens, effort begins to transform into something else, something quieter, something more natural, something we often call flow. Thank you for spending the time with me. Until next week, may you cultivate understanding, waste less effort, and discover more flow in your life.